and Politics Hour now. As we usually do most Tuesdays, check in with American University Professor of Politics, Jennifer Lawless. Jennifer, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
We are doing well up here, but all eyes in D.C. Don't even know where to start, but I think we have to start with Cohen and Hannity. This is the revelation that Cohen and Sean Hannity was the mystery client, so to speak, and now the fallout has just been monumental. What's the reaction been down in D.C.?
I think monumental, but also really surprising. I was actually in my office yesterday with a reporter doing something else, and the alert came through our phones, and we both looked at it, and she gasped audibly, just because nobody was expecting this, and certainly nobody was expecting that the judge was going to require that the name be disclosed during the hearing. So, I think we were all a little bit surprised, and this is also a situation where the extent to which Fox News is so linked to Donald Trump is pretty surprising.
And so let's talk about what's happening now. Sean Hannity has clearly tried to downplay, basically said, yes, maybe I had conversations, has nothing to do. To the average person, what does that mean?
Well, it means a couple of things. The first is that he said that it's just a few conversations, mostly about real estate, that he hadn't hired him as a lawyer per se. Yet, by the same token, he's saying that he believes that his conversations were protected by attorney-client privilege. And you can't have it both ways. Either he was his attorney, and that's why it's protected by attorney-client privilege, or he's not. So I think until Sean Hannity decides what he wants his relationship with Michael Cohen to be, we can't really forecast with any kind of accuracy how much of a bombshell this actually is.
And how, if or when, will his hand be forced to, so to speak, clarify this? Will we get a resolution as to which one it is?
Well, so my bet is that we're going to find out within the next couple of days for two reasons. The first is that Fox News is going to have to make a statement, because the fact that Sean Hannity has been covering Donald Trump and Michael Cohen and didn't disclose his relationship is problematic, and the network is going to have to say something about that. Moreover, it's clearly the case that Sean Hannity has to decide if the materials that might be disclosed are so embarrassing that he wants to actually admit that Michael Cohen is his lawyer so that they could potentially be privileged. If there's nothing there, or he's not that worried about the content, then my bet is that he'll say that they actually were not privileged because it allows him to maintain some degree of journalistic integrity.
What's your thought? Real estate or more?
More, of course, more. I mean, this is a situation where nobody has been telling the truth about anything regarding this investigation. And I think the one thing that all of these players have in common is they don't tell the truth until they're forced to. And if they all would have just said what their relationships were from the beginning, we probably wouldn't be in these positions.
Let's talk about Stormy Daniels, the sketch. The sketch is out there. Are there any suspects yet?
Not that I know of. Now, I should note, I've been traveling most of the day, so I haven't actually seen the sketch. I heard about the big reveal. But, I think this is another example of how convoluted and twisted and related all of these different aspects of investigation really are. It's strange enough that Stormy Daniels was at the courthouse yesterday. What's a little bit stranger is that she's making the media rounds today. And in a lot of ways is being upstaged by Sean Hannity, who wishes that his name wasn't being mentioned. So it's all a little bit an upside down world, I think.
And the upside down world, of course, it's distraction politics to the hilt in D.C. under the Trump administration. But, poor Comey, he's just not really getting any oxygen right now.
Well, he'll be on The View tomorrow, I think. Maybe that'll change things for him. I'll be interested to see how those ladies treat him. My heart does not bleed for James Comey. The one thing that I can say is that I found him to be more sanctimonious in his interview with George Stephanopoulos than I even thought was possible. This man is behaving as though the entire world was literally a weight upon his shoulders. And the only reason it was because he decided to make it that way. So, I don't find him a particularly sympathetic character. The Democrats don't like him, and neither do the Republicans. And frankly, both sides have good reason. That said, I think probably he's telling the truth, and every word he says I would lend credence to. But, I still think that there was a different way to go about doing it, and this was not the best way.
You talk about, again, the Dems not liking him, the Republicans not liking him, but apparently a bestseller.
Right. Well, we as the American people, I think, are somewhat hypocritical. We have major problems with the behavior of a lot of politicians and other men behaving badly, but we can't keep ourselves from reading their every word. So I have not purchased the book. Now, next week at this time, I very well may have, but at this point, I'm trying to hold strong. My bet is that the hour-long interview with George Stephanopoulos gives us the gist of what we needed to know.
So are you not getting the book on principle alone?
I am. I'm not getting the book on principle alone, and I don't have a lot of principles. So this demonstrates that there's really something off-putting about this book.
Well, as we talked, I mean, people who leave, obviously, positions go on to do other things. You know, books are often, on the table, so to speak, to maybe get a little cash. But do we expect this from a former FBI individual?
No. And we certainly don't expect it at this time. I mean, there's currently an open investigation. And so if James Comey really believes that he had no choice but to behave the way that he behaved because the entire government was resting upon him and because he couldn't trust anybody else to protect the integrity of the FBI and the Justice Department and the institution more broadly, then it's somewhat puzzling to understand why he would release the book now and not once the entire investigation is over. Not to mention the fact that it would probably be a more interesting book at that point, too, because he's currently involved.
Do we have a sense, have we seen dollar signs associated with this book deal? Is he not just cashing in?
Oh, he's cashing in. I haven't seen dollar signs yet, but I know that the publisher ordered 850,000 advance copies. So I think he's good to go for the foreseeable future.
So you talk, he did Stephanopoulos, but of course, between Cohen and Hannity, between Stormy Daniels, he's out there, on the dog and pony circuit, and he's certainly being possibly a little bit outshadowed by a few other things going on. But let's talk about going back to let's go to foreign relations. Let's talk about Syria. Let's talk about Russia. Let's talk about Nikki Haley, and let's talk about where Trump has now come down. The UN ambassador was proposing sanctions against Russia, and now the president wants to put the brakes on.
And it wasn't only that the UN ambassador was proposing sanctions. I mean, she was on the Sunday morning shows this weekend saying literally that as she was speaking, it was possible that Steve Mnuchin was executing the order to move forward with those sanctions. So this was a situation where it was not a proposal. In her view, it was a done deal, and it would very likely take place during the time that she was talking to Chuck Todd. So the fact that 48 hours later we have no sanctions, and 24 hours later Donald Trump made it clear that he had no interest in imposing them totally undermines her. And it undermines her not only as a member of the administration, but on the global stage as a member of the Trump administration who was viewed as pretty reputable and respectable on the international stage. So it's hard to imagine how she can maintain any degree of credibility or integrity and keep that position.
Well, what's the talk, so to speak? I mean, there's been talk, let's face it, about Nikki Haley having very pronounced political ambitions, talked about this, meteorological rise and ascension through the party. Again, I don't know if we'll ever find out. I mean, could there be a chance that this is a power play, so to speak? She maybe thought she had the green light, and then the rug got pulled out underneath her.
It might be, except I'm not really sure what her incentive would be to behave that way. The best thing that she could do would be to make it through the administration for the first term anyway, or to the impeachment, whichever comes first, and then say that she can't do this anymore or that she served her time, or to say, you know what, I can't work with this administration and step down and then pursue her political ambitions that way. I just don't see, this looks like she was undercut and that she assumed authority that she didn't have, and that doesn't bode well for a higher office at some point in the future.
So do you think this is very damaging for Nikki Haley moving forward?
No. So I actually think that if she says, oh my gosh, I can't trust this administration, I can't believe the way this president behaved, I'm stepping down, I think that could actually be quite helpful to her. If she continues to try and play the way that Donald Trump is playing, she's going to lose every time because nobody can anticipate his next move.
So is she operating on a very short time frame here, so to speak? I mean, does she really have the luxury of sort of days to think this over? Does she need to strike when the iron's hot to say, whoa, this is what really happened?
I'm not sure that she needs to come public and say this is what really happened if she decides to step down. If she plans to stay, then she's got to get her story straight with the president and explain why there was this miscommunication. But frankly, if there was a miscommunication or if they're going to spin it that way, then that's highly problematic. And you'd have to wonder if Donald Trump can trust her in that position. So, I tend to believe that what she said, she thought she was authorized to say, and that at some point it was agreed upon, just because of the certainty and the timeline that she put forward. She also does not have a habit of saying things that are completely undermined by the administration. So this leads me to believe that Donald Trump didn't like what he saw that morning. Not by Nikki Haley, but on Fox News or from Sean Hannity or whatever else, and changed course accordingly.
So one name that hasn't come up in this conversation today on today's show, Mueller. What are we keeping an eye on DC moving forward now?
Well, I think the seized documents from Cohen's office are the key here, because what Kimba Woods said was that both the prosecution and Michael Cohen's lawyers now get to look through the documents as soon as they are told what is privileged information and what's not. So I think we'll have a much better sense by the end of the week as to, because now we're talking about a 2 or 3 day delay, as to what it is that is in these documents, and we'll be able to read a little bit more in terms of tea leaves of what Bob Mueller is probably going to go for.
And now, are we seeing, what's the talk about politics with Kimba Wood, who we know was tops on Bill Clinton's list for AG. We know that Governor Gina Raimondo was a clerk for Kimba Wood. What's the talk on the politics involved?
I mean, the politics involved is more about the Southern District of New York and less about Kimba Wood per se. There's no question that she's a hard ass, right? If you'll pardon the expression. Nobody wants to be in front of her if they are, sort of worried that they did something wrong. And that court and that district is very well known for prosecuting quite heavily and not having a lot of sympathy for financial crimes. So, I think that this is the worst case scenario for Michael Cohen, assuming that he did anything wrong, and probably the best case scenario for eventually Bob Mueller's investigation.
So
I will say, though, that
she's tough, but she's also known as the love judge.
Well, so that's what I was going to say. I mean, the one thing that I'll be looking for over the course of the next few days is the manner in which she becomes a public interest story. Now, she's been in and out of the news over time because of various appointments and the fact that they gain national attention, but she's really in the spotlight now. And so the extent to which her history and her appearance and her background become fodder for commentary will be something that I'll be looking at for the next few days.
It will be interesting to see because, she's been dragged through public scrutiny before. This isn't like the first time we're looking at her bio.
That's right. It's just the first time that people might care because it's the first time that she's weighing in on something that the American public seems to think is particularly interesting and important.
Well, so much to keep an eye on down in D.C. Appreciate it as always, Jennifer. I know you've got stuff to get off to, so thank you for Skyping into the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. We'll talk next week.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks, Jennifer. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with our next guest here at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center.